Dave Gold, Program Coordinator, OpenSeas Hub at Old Dominion University. Jerry Cronin, the Director of OpenSeas Technology Innovation Hub, will be doing the presentation today.
Super. Well, welcome everybody. This is the first in a series of 4 of these items, and the purpose of these webinars is to we're in support of the Department of Energy's SBIR/STTR program, particularly the things coming out of the Water Power Technology Office and the Solar Energy Technology Office. So just a quick question. Have you all read the topics or the funding opportunity announcement yet? I think folks are on mute. Okay.
Okay, good to go.
And as Steve said earlier, prior to we kick this off, if this is for folks who are applying or who may be interested in applying, and it might end up being the case where you don't go after this one, but there's going to be more in the future. They come out with 2 SBIR releases per year, plus the Department of Energy and the National Renewable Energy Lab come out with a number of challenges through something they call the American-Made Network, which are all targeted at very similar topics. So this will help you get prepped for those type of things. I'm from the OpenSeas Technology Innovation Hub. These are the things we do. Basically, we're sort of an accelerator, incubator type activity, working with startups or working with organizations, trying to find difficult problems, and then working with, say, innovators and startups to try to solve those things. And more importantly, from our standpoint, try to make sure they see the light of day going forward. So it's just not a research project that ends up being something that comes out, provides value to the world. So agenda for today is basically hit a little bit about why we're doing this, talk about something we call business opportunity development, and then highlight a bunch of assistance and resources that are available to people to help them on their journey as they go forward. So why are we doing this? The SBIR and STTR program's been around for a long while, and they call it Small Business Innovation Research, the technology transfer into small business type operations. But one of their concerns is that over time, they haven't seen an awful lot of these things end up going into the marketplace and becoming viable businesses or viable enterprises. So the concern is, hey, we're paying for research, we're paying for things to be developed, but then at the end, they're not seeing life. You get to the end of a process and they're not being invested in. Companies are not being effectively stood up to sell it, i.e. the value that you hope would come out to the marketplace and to humankind and the environment isn't getting achieved. So there's a renewed focus on commercialization and bringing things to life. So if you think of it, it's kind of a two work stream type issue. Obviously, there's always the technology work stream, and everybody, particularly scientists and engineering types, tend to get buried in that. But equally important is that commercialization stream. And what I mean by commercialization is pretty broad. It's just not your typical business stuff, but it's also, even if you're creating a nonprofit out of something, even if you're doing something along those lines, how does it become an ongoing operation as opposed to just writing the final report and then things go off into the wilderness? So the second why is we're really looking to increase your chances of success. So a notion is if you're going after an SBIR or an STTR or one of these challenges, it's a great way to kind of reduce your risk. There's money involved in those things. You can get money from the government, money from sponsors. So it kind of takes away some of that, some of those problems. But you're also looking to do something for the long term, to start a business, to get something that can be licensed, to get something that can go out to the world. The problem is, in the startup world, as you see the notes up here, over 65% of stuff pure fails, meaning it doesn't return even $1 on $1 invested. 45% doesn't return anything. So that narrow 35% band of things that quote unquote work Some of those are just zombies, they call them. They limp along, and very few are the skyrocket things. Okay. Primary cause for this, when they go and they do sort of the postmortems and they do the after action type things, is it's not money. Strangely enough, there's a lot of money out there right now. The major issue for these things failing is lack of what you call a product market fit, i.e., you're doing something, you think it's great, but the market or the end adapters are going, I don't care. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't save me money. It doesn't improve something. I really don't care about it. So really dealing with that product market fit is the number one thing to help make things more of a success. The second one is a team. And this is important, particularly in the technical fields. And I can say that I come from a family of engineers, started off in physics, yay, rah, rah. Okay. You tend to be very, very enamored and very, very into your technologies and things like that. And attention's not paid to those weird guys who do things like marketing or do things like business analysis, or those strange folks who do accounting and keep the books. You know, they're not of the tribe, so to speak. The problem is you need all those folks to make a concern get up and going and help you get the technology out of the marketplace. And it's just not an afterthought. I've heard some tech guys or some scientist guys say, well, business isn't rocket science. Well, it kind of is. There's ways of going about things to make things work and up their probability of success. So what we're looking to do in these seminars is help you mitigate some of these issues and kind of give you an overview of how to do that. General thoughts for innovators and startups. I always do this whenever I'm starting to work with people. It's hard work. You got the technical side. You're trying to advance the technical readiness level. You're trying to solve really, really difficult problems, things like that. On top of that, you're trying to get a business up and going. It's painful. I have those scars. I've been involved in startups. I've been involved in really, really large corporations. I don't come from the academic side of the house. They hired me out of the commercial world a few years ago to run a bunch of programs and fix them. It's hard work. Second one we just talked about, success is not guaranteed. It's almost like opening a restaurant. It's not a high probability of success, but you can increase your probability by doing the right things. Just an editorial thing. Outside investment is a rare thing. Shark Tank is reality TV and not reality. Okay, the notion that somebody's going to go and write you a $3 million check to let you carry stuff on probably won't happen. But there's other ways of getting things forward. Takes multiple skill sets. We talked about that. And the notion of a pivot. Okay, in the early stages of an SBIR, an STTR, or a challenge, you're going out and you're doing some market exploration. You're talking to end users, or you should be. And what's going to happen when you talk to those folks is you're going to find out some of the things you assumed about what they wanted and what they'd love and what would work. And even the problem you're trying to solve wasn't exactly what you expected. My personal example of that is I put together about 20,000 lines of brilliant code in an expert system to help identify wetlands. I thought everybody was going to want that. We launched it, nobody cared. But the good thing was we pivoted and we started an environmental engineering company, which we ended up running for like 9 or 10 years. So that wasn't too bad. But my assumption was wrong. But I never went out and validated the assumption. I didn't know then what I know now. And at the end, it's the customer or the end user that really counts. Are you solving a problem that they care about? So we put this framework into something we call business opportunity development. And it's heavily based on something they call lean startup methodology for the engineers or the process geeks in the house. You're basically starting with some sort of business model, what you think a value proposition, what you're going to take to the market, how are you going to take it to the market. You're going out, you're doing discovery to find out if your assumptions are right. Then you're going through what they call agile development, which is not trying to do the whole world at once, but go through iterative steps of small launches of things that are of value to the marketplace so you can get feedback and learn what works, learn what doesn't work, those types of things. And it keeps on, those arrows down at the bottom are just those things keeping on iterating. Finally, you launch what we call a minimal viable product, which is the smallest thing you can take out to the marketplace to start getting feedback on it. So it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it starts getting it out there. And you take the information from that and from heavy involvement with your clients, your end users, your customers, and that's how you plan your future releases. In our business opportunity development world, these are kind of the steps we break it down. The first thing we look at is assessing the opportunity. That's developing that business model, doing some validation against it, until finally we end up with something we can march to, doing planning, and then going through the operational execution. And feel free to ask any questions at any particular point in time. So, and we'll send this out to you also. So we'll send a copy of it because it also has got resources identified at the end that you can tap into. So this is the overview. This is how we break it down. That upper left block is all about the opportunity assessment. What we're doing there, as you see, initial model, test and validate assumptions, then we go and we revise it or pivot. When we finish that, we've got something we can then operate and march against. Phase two is where you're going and you're planning. Some programs are really, that you'll see, some national programs, some others are really heavy on that first part, but I come from the operational world. At some point in time, you actually have to plan stuff. So that's phase two for us. You're developing that startup plan, your financial requirements, and how it's going to be funded. Okay. Next phase, you're going out, you're obtaining funding. SBIRs might be part of your strategy for doing that, but it shouldn't be your only strategy. And finally, you're executing and you keep on iterating through all those steps like we discussed before. So we break this down into a bunch of key activities that we kind of coach people through and recommend people go through. The first competency cluster is something we call the value proposition cluster, which answers the question, do I have a solution that has market value? And we'll talk about the things under it pretty heavily in this session because it's kind of the fundamental work for making things, bringing things forward into the future. We'll talk about something called NAVC, customer segmentation, the idea of a value thesis, customer discovery, and finally ending up with a value proposition. Value proposition is what you're taking to the market. All right, what you're saying to the market that you're bringing to them of value. The second item is, okay, now you've got to sort of have this value proposition. The next question is, can I build a sustainable high growth business around it? Can I build a business around it? So people say they want it, they say it scratches an itch, but now you got to go and figure out, can I actually deliver this and make money at it or make it such that it'll be funded? So that's the business, what we call the business modeling cluster. And all that, this first part's all around the business opportunity assessment. Second competency set of clusters is the planning one. And it really comes down to these three areas. One, what do I need to do to make it real? And you want to look at that, particularly from just starting up. How do I get from where I am right now to the next phase, which might be the release of an MVP, might be the release of some initial products, those sorts of things. What's it take from where you are right now to get to that point? Taking a look at, okay, once I'm up and going, what are my, what's it going to take keep the wheel spinning? Because at that point in time, I might not be doing the same amount of research and development than other items. So how do I keep a steady state operation going forward? And then some of your last considerations should be, okay, what's my path to growth? How do I see this expanding? Typically, you'll go after one particular market segment, and we'll talk about it later, called a beachhead. Okay, so growth might be, okay, once we've nailed this particular market segment, how do we get into others? How are we going to expand the products? How are we going to pay for future releases? Those sorts of things. So that's your strategy for growth. The financial planning, okay, is answering the two questions. What will it cost to start and operate? And how much will it make? Steve will laugh. I always call this part the mean old Mr. Math part of a business, which is, your revenues have got to exceed your costs. Even if you're a nonprofit, what comes in has to exceed what you're putting out to deliver the goodness, or all the goodness stops. In a for-profit business, same thing applies. The only thing that makes something a nonprofit is its tax status. It still has to follow the fundamental laws of operations, which is you got to bring in more than you spend, or you can't keep on doing what you're doing. So what's it going to cost to start up? What's the cost for operations? What are the revenues going to look like? And also some stuff about market projections. And we'll hit this pretty heavily next week when we talk about creating value. This is part and parcel of, estimating that type of stuff out in the market. And the last bit, funding sources. How does it get funded? If you're looking at this SBIR STTR, or you're looking at some of the challenges coming out of DOE, that's an example of a funding source. Typically, if you shouldn't be pinned upon only one funding source. If it's something you want to do and get up and going, coming up with a plan of, hey, these are the types of folks who invest in these sorts of things, whether it be government or actual investors, or yourself, if you've got a business already going and you're starting a new line of business, dealing with how are you going to do that? So that's the funding cluster. How does it get funded? And sometimes you end up having to come up with a funding plan, and sometimes you'll have to do some sort of pitch. And that pitch can go to various people. It might go to investors or angels, or it might go to a bank, or it might go to the government because you're going after a client. Those are all different types of pitches, and tuning them to the particular audience you're going after is a key part of trying to, make your business and make your technology see the light of day. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of cover some of the things in the earlier parts of the process, just for folks' information. One of the things we like using is something called NABC. It's not something we invented, came out of Stanford, out in California, came out of their design school, actually. But it's a pretty quick down and dirty way of looking at a business opportunity. It's kind of the first cut if you think of it. So you ought to be able to answer these 4 questions, or have at least a theory about these 4 questions, which you'll then do customer discovery and do some modeling to discover if they're actually true. The first thing is, are you solving a problem that the market actually cares about? So when people come into OpenSeas or Tempo, the program Steve and I run, prior to even talking heavily about the technology, and I love technology, one of our prime question is, what's the problem you're solving? Have you talked to anybody? What do they tell you about the problem? Do they even care about the problem? So that's that need. That's the N in this model. The next question is, okay, what's your approach to meeting that need? How are you going to solve it? How do you propose doing it? So, and that's where the technology comes in, but also processes and the full implementation. How are you going to go out and deliver a solution to the marketplace that fills that need? After that, the benefit. And really, this should be unique benefit, okay? Because the idea here will be, it's just not that you're solving the problem, it's you need to go to the market with a better way of solving a problem. If somebody comes in with say a blue ink pen and says, hey, I invented this blue ink pen, it's better than that black ink pen, there's not much differential there. So the question is, how much differential value, how much extra value are you creating that's really going to convince the people who are buying, or the people who have to decide to implement your solution, to switch over and change and actually pay you for it? And the cases where a lot of the value you're providing is economic, a big question becomes how much differential value you're adding, because that's what you're getting paid at. So for example, something I'm pretty familiar with is offshore renewables and things along those lines. if I can do something that cuts the cost of getting bottom surveys out in the water, kind of the conditions of the ground, if I can drop that cost by 30%, because maybe I get a more efficient way of detecting something, that's huge. I can do the math on that. That says that's a tens, hundreds of millions of dollar problem. Okay. If I come in and I'm only creating maybe a 2% difference, if at all, then it's going to be really hard for me to convince people to stop what they're doing and come and try this new thing when all they can predict is they're going to get 2% better at it. Now, in some cases, 2% works. There are certain industries like the grocery industry or the airline industry, where if you can come in with like a 5% change increase in value or savings or increase in revenue, they'll jump right on it. But most folks want to see some kind of significant change in value, some significant benefit coming from your opportunity. And then the last one is, who's the competition? And everyone is, everybody has competition, even if it's that your client does nothing. So what are people doing about that problem right now? Is it important enough? So that's NABC. Okay. Now let's talk about customer segments. Okay. First thing to realize is that everybody's not your market. So if you're coming in with, say, a particular solar approach to doing something, is it industrial buildings? Is it residential buildings? Is it residential in a particular area? How does your market divide? Because your solution's not going to sell into every single market, or to go after every market at once is just too expensive, and it's kind of going to dilute your effort. So everybody's not your market. You want to segment the customers. And how you want to choose which market you're going to go after at first. And these are all things that the DOE and the SBIR people want to see. They're starting to look at you having an understanding of this. So what are the things that'll influence you? Maybe you're looking for the place that has the highest revenue. Maybe you're looking for the place that's really feeling a lot of pain around the problem and is really ready for somebody to come in with a solution. The type of place that when you're talking to people in the area, they go, gosh, if somebody came in with this, I'd buy it right now because it's killing us. It's eating our lunch. Receptivity. Sometimes it's, how easy would it be? Or would it be? Do I want to pick the place that's the hardest to implement it first? Hardest meaning there's probably going to be associated problems, or do I want to find a place that's pretty easy? I can get my stuff out there and start getting feedback. Then competition. Am I going into an area where the competition's strong? And the last one's a personal thing. Does it really align with your goals, your capabilities, and your resources? In the end, it's up to you. Two things that are important to think about. The first is the notion of a beachhead market. All right. Your beachhead market's the first market you're going to go after. All right. So you pick all those possible customer segments. You really hone in your value proposition around one, and that's the one you go after. You get in, you get feedback, and you build your strength. And you're going into that market with what we call a minimal viable product. So it's not going to be the product that has all the bells, all the whistles, all the dashboards, everything you can think of. Because once you get out of the marketplace, what you'll discover is that there are features there that people don't care about, that add no value to the end users. And it costs you money to develop and maintain those features, money that's not making a difference to the people who are using your solution. So a minimal viable product is a scaled down set of things designed to provide value to those customers and start getting the relationship and the feedback going. Okay, we'll hit this a little bit more next week, but the notion of a value proposition canvas is something that's highly useful. On the right-hand side is a customer segment. The circle is a customer segment, okay? And that customer has certain jobs they need to do. And those jobs can be technical ones, like, for example, I need to move cargo from place to place. I need to power my house. I need to power my factory. Okay, those sorts of things. They could also be social or environmental things where they're also saying, and I want to do it in a way that's environmentally friendly. That's a job to them. That's important. That's something they want to accomplish. So you look at those things for a customer segment, then you ask two questions. What you want to know is what's painful to them when they're doing it? What do they wish would change? From what they're doing right now, which you ask them that question, what do they think could be better? Right? Those are pains. Gains you don't always find, but gains are sort of the wow factor. What would be a game changer in the whole thing? And it's just not flipping a pain into, okay, it used to take me too much time. Now it doesn't take me all that much time. We've reduced the price by, 20% or whatever. A gain is something that's very, very significant. Think the, putting music on back in the day, an iPod, which now it goes on the phones. That was a game changer. Who thought of that? Nobody even knew they needed it. It was a gain into the industry that all of a sudden launched a whole bunch of stuff. Tesla's ability to do 0 to 60 in a ridiculously short amount of time. That's a wow factor. It's not they're not solving a pain for anybody unless they're a racer, but it's a wow factor. It's a gain. On the left-hand side is your solution. It's what you're bringing to the market. And a solution is a combination of products and services. And they should map over to things on that other side. So your products and services are going to help the customers execute their jobs and the things they're trying to achieve. And they're going to either relieve pain or they're going to create a gain. And when you do the mapping on these things, the better these things correlate, the better that these things map back and forth, the closer what they call the product market fit. And remember, the number one reason for failure for startups is lack of product fit, which typically occurs because people don't understand their customer segments. And so they haven't designed their solution to fit in with what that customer segment's looking for. Okay. Once you know your customer segment, you're going to try and come up with something called a value thesis, which is it's your working hypothesis. My solution helps this customer to do something better. All right. And it does this by doing X, Y, and Z. And this is the type of value it creates. So this is when you're at a party, you're in an elevator, you hear about elevator speeches, you have a chance opportunity to talk to the head of development someplace that's looking to put solar in or revise energy systems or something along those lines. This is that quick statement that gets their attention. And on the bottom, you say, hey, this solution includes X, Y, and Z. And an example of this is when we helped ODU, Old Dominion University, put together something called Balance for Life program. It's aimed at helping reducing the amount of slips and falls that happen coming out of hospitals, that happen with older people, younger people. It's a very expensive problem. So we looked at customer segments, and we thought a customer segment was going to be continuous care retirement communities. So we thought our solution would do the things you see here: prevent, reduce, mitigate falls, providing a program, reducing the falls, and enabling a longer, higher quality of life. Great value thesis. We went out there, we validated the value thesis. Hey, they like it. We did this at a number of facilities. Folks were willing. And then we got to the next segment of our work, which was trying to build a business model around it. And therein came the problem. The way that the Medicare system is set up and the way payments work in the medical industry, the cost of providing the service as designed wouldn't fit within what Medicare would pay. And typically in health, folks are only willing to pay what Medicare will pay. So we had to revise this, and we moved it into hospitals who have a big problem with people falling within 3 months of leaving the hospital. The hospital has to track that, and they get dinged on it. So we ended up having to change our customer segment. But this is the thesis we started out with, and this is what we tried, and eventually found out we couldn't build a business model to support the value proposition. To find out these things, you do customer discovery. Why? You see the items right there. The customer's viewpoint's the one that counts. You have to understand the problems in order to confirm a value proposition and to design a solution that brings value to the market, to the end users. Two areas: you try to generally understand their business, where your solution fits in, okay, into their overall scheme of things, and then you target specifically the exact set of problems that your solution is trying to solve. So that's customer discovery. We'll talk about it a little bit more next week. Okay. Keys to doing it, you see right here: empathy, a beginner's mind, being inquisitive. There's a reference here that you can go to that I found was pretty good, so I'm calling it out. But going out and doing customer discovery is a key part of making this as a business work. And these are the types of questions to ask. What don't I understand? What don't I understand about their business, their experience? And where am I making an assumption in my value proposition or my business model that I need to either validate or prove false? Who can answer these questions? How do I reach them? Give yourself a timeline, and give yourself a script. Okay. That's value proposition. Like I said, we'll hit a little bit more on that next week. This is more overview-ish type stuff. The business model canvas is a highly useful tool. At the Institute here, we deal a lot with people who are coming in trying to stand up businesses. You can go online and find a template for a business plan that'll knuckle drag you through 155 pages and end up with something that's not very useful. Using a business model and a business model canvas enables you to get down to the basics, because that's what you're trying to validate, do your customer discovery and your validation against. So at the front part, it's really the model that's the important thing, to do the discovery and hone the solution. And once you do that, then you can get into the detailed planning. But it's generally a waste of time to go into deep detailed planning until you know what you're going to deliver. So the one I like comes from Alex Osterwalder, and there's a reference to him at the end, a company called Strategizer. He's the guy who figured this out. It's just a simple way to lay out and evaluate your business. It's also a good way if you're running a business and you're trying to decide what new product or what new area you want to go after. It's a way of comparing them side by side and enabling you to make better business decisions or informed business decisions as to which ones you want to support and go after. It's not a business plan, it's a framework. And this is what it contains. Okay. The middle part where it says start here, that's your value proposition. These things are built around a value proposition. With no value proposition, the rest of the business model canvas doesn't do you any good. So the key things are value proposition, which is what do you do? And then in the upper right, who do you help? So I'd say, your first bit of work is really looking at the customer segment and what you're going to bring to that customer segment that's of value to them. Then the question is, okay, how do you interact with them? What kind of relationships they're looking for? And how do you reach them? So that's what value you're providing to the customer. Left-hand side, key partners, key activities, and resources. The question is, okay, how do I do it? What are my key activities? How do I do this? What do I need to do it? Those are my key resources. And if I'm not doing everything in-house, who are my key partners? So if I'm depending on suppliers, say I'm a solar company and I'm buying panels from someplace, or I'm buying frames from someplace, those would be partners. Your vendors are partners. All right. They don't necessarily own a part of your business, but they need to be in your considerations. All right. Then at the bottom is that part I like to call mean old Mr. Math, which is how much you're going to make. That's your revenue stream. And what are your cost structures associated with running the business? And this is a little bit better definition of those items. So you see value proposition, combination of goods and services, right? That's what you're taking to the customer. Customer segments, you need to pick a primary segment. That's your beachhead. You might have some secondary segments, but your primary guys are the ones you're going after. Customer relationships, you think of over the life cycle of your solution. What kind of support you're going to have to do? So it's not just enough to install a system for somebody. You have to ask the question is, okay, after installation, what kind of relationships are these people looking for? If I download an app from the web, from the Apple Store or the Google Store or something like that, I really don't expect a hand-holding relationship with the company I got the app from. If I am installing large bits of, say, power management software for a large organization, they're probably going to want me to have an installation team to help them get the whole thing set up. If I'm installing power systems or panels or electricity generators, you got to ask the question is, okay, once it's up and going, how does it get maintained? So thinking of all that is a key part of the business here. And those are covered in your key activities and what resources you're going to have to do to use to do them. And yet, just like with your value proposition, you need to validate your assumptions within your business model. So for example, if you say, well, we're going to design the systems, but I don't want to build a sales force. I want to sell them through somebody else. Say it's called a channel strategy. Okay, they're going to go out and sell the stuff for me. Okay. Have you talked to any of those people? Going and finding out who they are, what kind of cut they want, what your pricing needs to be to get into there. If you're expecting that somebody else is going to do the maintenance, okay, is there anything special they need to know about the maintenance? Do you need to put together a package and maybe certify people who are going to maintain the system? Or are you going to stand up part of your organization to handle that particular function? These are all things you put together in your business model. It's a snapshot of how the business is going to work. Then down at the bottom, revenue streams and cost structures. What's the revenue? Okay, what's your revenue model? So for example, a transactional revenue model is I give you a pen and you give me $2 because it's a nice pen, okay? Or it's a really nice pen, you give me $50 or whatever I can sell it for. That's a transactional type thing. A subscription might be along the lines of, I'm not going to sell you the pen, or maybe I'm going to sell you the basic pen, but I'm going to give you a subscription for the ink. Or maybe it's like General Electric, which doesn't sell its airplane jet engines. What it does is it sells time on those engines. So it's really a subscription that's based on the amount of flight hours that the engines are being used for. There's licensing and royalties. Other revenue streams can be implementation consulting. So you buy my system, we can also help you install it. That's a consulting thing. And then parts and follow-on support. So those are all examples of revenue streams. So knowing what those are and kind of modeling those out. And then on the cost structure side, looking at three different areas. First area is, what are the startup costs? Okay. From now until you get your MVP out there, until you're up and you're a stable operation, what's it going to cost you to do this? You've got some research to do. Okay. I need to develop something. I need to design something. I've got to pay an engineer or professional engineer to certify a bracket or something along those lines. Those are all startup costs. Then you've got your ongoing costs, which are either fixed, which are what's it cost you to just keep the doors open for your office space, for your staff, for other people going out and doing something, even if you don't sell anything. And then your ongoing variable costs, what you call the incremental cost of goods sold. Every unit you put out there, every solution you launch, every time you get a new customer, what's the incremental cost of putting that solution into place? So if I need to go and install something on a roof, there's a crew, there's brackets, there's panels, there's a control system. All those things I incur each and every time I install a system. And you've got to do the math behind this to model it out. All right. Hearing no questions so far, the next session we're going to deal with next week is on creating impact and value, because that's something in the early stages they're going to want to see you make some reference to in your applications. Okay, what's the impact you're going to create? And that's not only the economic impact, but that's also social impact and environmental impact. How do you quantify those things, and how do you put a value against them? That's what we're going to hit next week. Just a side point on SBIRs and some of these other things, that most of them are all asking for something about your commercialization, and there's some templates for doing that. It's pretty easy in the application. This is about making sure that as you're doing the work, you actually end up with something that at the end you're able to launch, move into phase 2, and then move out to the actual world. With no questions, I'm going to look at resources. We've got a few pages of resources here for your reference. Excuse me. For this particular thing, this particular SBIR STTR opportunity, these are the opportunity sites. There's the topics, and there's also the federal opportunity announcement. The DOE opportunity site lists generally what opportunities are there. Then the Water Power Technology Office has 2 places where they put webinar slides, and they also put webinar recordings on presentations they've done before, that if you're going down that route, you can take a look. DOE also has a marvelous tutorial site on doing SBIRs and STTRs, and it particularly hits what you have to put into your applications to win them. Okay. The PAMS website is where they're doing their business. So when you put in a letter of interest, or you put in your actual submission, it goes through the PAMS website. There's something called Phase 0 support, which is prior to submitting your your phase 1 application. A company called Dawnbreaker is available to help a limited amount of folks put those applications together. DOE is paid for a number of market studies on various topics they're looking at. And then there's something called the Clean Energy Business Network. They're another power connector, and they keep a list of the events that are going on. And there's also something called Technical and Business Assistance. That's where you can get extra money when you get an SBIR to bring in somebody like us or somebody else to help coach you through the actual commercialization work that's happening during your phase 1 or your phase 2. These are the rest of the seminars and also office hours that we're running here through OpenSeas. You see the dates there and the links to sign up for them. And finally, at the end, we talked about Osterwilder and the business model canvas. Lean Startup is the brainchild of a really bright guy named Eric Ries, and that's his site. I think he came out of MIT originally. YouTube and Strategizer has some really, really great short videos on how to take an idea to business using the business model canvas. And a fellow named Steve Blank is, again, one of the gurus on customer discovery and development. So, these are places you can go to. You can get smarter on. It'll help you on your journey as you're trying to figure out how do you take your idea and your innovation and bring it into reality.